Welcome to the High Performance Herd. Today, we're lucky to have Jody Snodgrass, the Chief Executive Officer at TruGrid, join us. Jody, welcome.
Yep. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to have you here. As we always start here, the kind of purpose of this podcast is to share how you've grown a team into something high performing. But I always start, usually there's something that drew you into leadership, something that early in your life or as you kind of climb the corporate ladder said, I want to build something bigger than myself. I want to lead an organization. I want to build teams. What was that for you?
It's an interesting question because I can always remember myself being as a leader, even like in junior high and high school as a captain of different teams. I was vice president, president of student government, and started a company when I was 20, and I was led all of the operations for that organization. And I just, I always, seem to have gravitated towards being in the leadership spot. And I don't know if that's whether I just like to have my way or or whether how that worked out, but that's how it is.
And when you think about the origins of that, was that your upbringing? Was that something that was modeled for you? Early, it's always interesting kind of, well, where did
I
that come from?
certainly, would lean on, my as long as I can remember, my father's owned his own consulting engineering firm, so I was always, he was always the guy in charge, and I worked for him through multiple summers and Christmas and spring breaks and those kinds of things, and I guess maybe I saw that modeled, as a child coming up, but that's how I thought it was supposed to be.
Yeah, it's funny, Jody, because I had similar. My parents worked at retail stores that my grandparents owned at one point, and I started working there when I was like 10. How do I sweep the floors and take out the trash? And um, in a similar way, that was like, well, I've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I've always wanted to have my own business. I've always wanted to do that because that's what you saw as a early child. Um, so take us from kind of those early days, drawing you into leadership, and give us kind of the short. Here's my climb to CEO of TruGrid. Kind of what was the journey?
Sure. So, as I mentioned, I started my own company when I was 20. I had two business partners, both the opposite of me. I was a 20-year-old, not yet engineer, and they were both mid 50 CPAs who had had a pretty storied career, particularly in mergers and acquisitions over the years. And we started that and built it out over the next 10 years, did multiple acquisitions, and got up to about 300 or so employees in seven locations in five states. Very successful, well, sets of companies. There were three companies actually, and sold that at a 10 plus multiple EBITDA in 2000, and that really you know I was 30 and I didn't know what to do with myself, and stayed on for a couple of years as a transition guy, and ultimately then went back out and started a renewable energy development company, specifically in anaerobic digestion gasification, and did quite a bit of development work and got a couple patents and those types of things to lead that through. And 2006, thought I was going to be a billionaire because natural gas was $12 a million BTU, and we were making money hand over fist. And then horizontal drilling and fracking happened, and the entire world of natural gas changed. And um, uh, I essentially lost everything I ever made, and then some. And my wife told me I had to get a real job, and I ended up in Jacobs in a leadership position. But building out what they had was a kind of a fledgling division, and doubled that year on year for about 5 years in a row. And then with Jacobs, got the opportunity to go to went to the oil sands, went to Western Canada, to Calgary, and then that was just the explosion there was amazing. We went from two employees. I was employee one, and I had a guy start the day after me, and he was employee two, and we built that out to between all the the engineering, procurement, and construction folks and everything else, about 4,200 people in about 18 months. And amazingly enough, when oil's $130 a barrel, people spend money. So that was it was the hiring people was much harder than it was getting the work. And oil crashed in 2015, and found myself really kind of pivoting and going a different direction, and getting out of the for a bit, getting out of the true EPC side of the business, and ended up at Deloitte in their uh, um, basically as a capital projects consultant. I had I'd leveraged work that really good work that we had teams do on a couple of projects in Western Canada, and was able to leverage that into a consulting career, and then found myself in 2018 really wanting to get back to the U.S. and ended up at a company called Covanta, which is the world's largest energy from waste company. They burn trash to make electricity, and I ran their capital portfolio for a couple 3 years. They got acquired, and a lot of folks got packages, and I ended up at Avangrid as their EVP of projects, overseeing their capital portfolio, about $3.5 billion portfolio of wind, solar, BESS, and a little bit of other, green hydrogen, and a few other things, and um, was there for a couple of years, then went to a company called IEA White Construction, which at the time was the largest, one of the largest, if not the largest, renewable energy EPC contractors in North America. And during my time there, they were acquired by Maztec, and so I found myself out looking for a role again, not really expecting to, but looking for a role, and ended up ultimately with private equity group called Whole Street Energy, who owns at the time was SunGrid Solutions, but we've rebranded that to TruGrid. And so really, trying to take TruGrid from a bit of a fledgling company into a true, national EPC contractor, and essentially brought in an entirely new team to do that.
So we'll dive into all of that. But what's amazing about that story, Jody, is many entrepreneurs have had kind of the roller coaster ride. Yours sounds like multiple roller coaster
There,
rides.
there were lots of high highs and lots of low lows.
Yeah, and as you reflect upon that, either now or it was happening, what would you share with other entrepreneurs that might experience it?
It's really two things. I would say number one is um, you have to know when to exit. And as a true entrepreneur, you always think it's going to get better. You're many times the eternal optimist, and it's always going to get better. And sometimes you're at the peak, or nearing the peak, and that's always the best time to exit is right before the peak. And hindsight's always 2020. It's hard to see that sometimes, but there a lot of times are writing on the wall when you get multiples that are not normal for your industry or the industry in general. You get a lot of play, but just as importantly, the other side of that is when you've gotten to the bottom, maybe there's no way out. And I use my natural gas, my the biogas that we were generating. You get used to that $12 million BTU uh, uh, price tag, and you always think it's going to come back. It's going to come back. It's going to come back. And we should have exited, much sooner than what we did, because you just, again, that internal optimist, you think it's going to get better, and
Eh,
in that case, it never did.
Well, and Jody, those are you still there? Or
Yes.
we froze for a moment. So there've been plenty of industries to go through that, and it's an interesting if you replay your own or look at because there's the history of business is filled with those. Like, hey, this old technology is replaced. This old way of doing things is replaced, and we're living some of that with AI now. Like we're going to see changes in the way things are done. As you reflect upon that you've lived through, and you shared some like see it, but what's kind of the inevitability of that, and how have you thought about it post? I'm just curious.
I mean, it's It's always going to change. It's always going to change. And, I many times through my career and this morning, get criticized that I am I am too far ahead of the organization. That
Mm,
I am 2 years ahead of where the organization is because I spend an awful lot of time doing. I'm a firm believer in continuous learning, and it's not to plaster degrees on the wall and get certifications and those kinds of things. It's for me, it's twofold. It's number one, to be able to have enough basic knowledge about whatever it is we're discussing that I can have a competent discussion and ask the right questions. That being said, I never want to be the smartest guy in the room. That's not my role or even what I want to do. I'm not trying to be the subject matter expert. I just want to know enough to have the conversation. But part of being a leader of any organization, small, large, or anything else, is being able to look out into the future and try to forecast or predict what the next step change is going to be. And as an example, I've spent probably the last 9 months. I think I've taken 8, 9, 10 classes now from Vanderbilt and Wharton on AI and learning everything I can try to learn about AI because I think that's the next step change.
yeah, well, and I think that you've illustrated something important, and I think many entrepreneurs get trapped in like, well, I can just do what I'm doing. And it's like, no, it's usually not enough. And I've lived through it a bunch and I've lived through it with organizations that are living through it. Like, no, we need to embrace the new, look at it. And whenever there's this, moment of chaos with new emerging, there's also opportunity. There's like a, well, how do I take
We
advantage of it? It's funny because
we
I'm with a trucking company yesterday and the CEO, many of the team were griping about the current oil prices for diesel. And he's like, "I'm hoping it goes to $10." And his reason was, he's like, "In that chaos, we'll win."
that
And, I think that there's something in that and something that you've lived through, which is interesting, and we'll get into TruGrid here in a minute, but that was too hard for me to, just drive by and not ask a couple
no,
follow-up
no,
questions.
we joke all the time. I've heard this multiple times. I've said it myself sometimes, but there's cash and chaos.
Well, and the other thing you said is that the stay ahead, clearly leadership requires vision. It requires the what is gonna happen, and I used to say to my team all the time, like, "Get used to certainty when there's none." I'm certain of the future until I'm not, and that the ability to lead, I always frame is, well, I gotta inspire people to believe in something. So I have to believe it first. And I have to inspire them to go, "Yeah, we're headed in the right direction," and then shortly thereafter, inspire them to take action toward the belief. So it's not enough just to get
Right.
people on board and drink the Kool-Aid. It's like, well, no, we gotta go make the Kool-Aid. We gotta figure out how we do it. We gotta figure out how we make it at volume or whatever we're doing. And so, um, I'm curious, when you joined TruGrid, what was it? Because you said fledgling. I'm just describe what it
Uh,
was when you joined.
yeah. So when I came on board, SunGrid was really marketed itself as a software company, and that's actually how SunGrid started. SunGrid started as a software company, as an integrator, in traditional battery systems, you have six disparate main components that the ones and zeros don't necessarily talk to each other, and there's no like standard language and standard protocols set up for how a battery system works. And so integrators came about in trying to make all those pieces talk to each other and talk to each other efficiently. And the SunGrid guys, who were software and electrical engineers, did an amazing job of making the stuff talk to each other. But it turns out that um, great software guys don't necessarily make great contractors, and so part of when I came to SunGrid was really trying to determine, how do we pivot ourselves from a software centric company to a construction centric company. And on top of that, SunGrid was
Mm,
really too many things to
we're freeze
too many
we're
people.
free we're freezing up a little bit. Jody, would you just go back and said, hey, when you came to the engineering team and you did this, what happened?
Yeah, so when I arrived, the engineering team was excellent at doing um, putting together the automation and the integration and the SCADA and making all the pieces talk to each other, but they weren't necessarily great contractors.
Got it.
And so part of that uh, rebrand, if you will, was to really position SunGrid as a true EPC contractor and O&M services company, and kind of get out of the myriad of other things that they did. They also had a product line, which we ultimately sold to Generac. We did one-off engineering, one-off solar for community scale, like rooftop solar and car parks and those kinds of things, and really focus on utility scale construction and O&M services of that. And that was part of that rebrand from SunGrid to TruGrid, is let's just focus on a couple of things and do them really well.
So, in that transition, what role, how did you think about it? How did you move from kind of, it sounds like, a broader approach to the market in some ways to a more disciplined, here's what we're going to be good at? How did you determine this is what we're going to be good at and this is what we're going to pursue?
It was actually more simple than you'd like to think. When you looked at the revenues, 90+% of our revenues were construction. We're actually a construction company. So let's go be a construction company. And when you look
Got it.
at what are the what are the expectations from the private equity who owns us? What are they looking at? What kind of multiples are they looking at? What's the revenue and return on that they want to see? You couldn't get there with some of those other services that we were offering. So it's like let's put those to the side and let's just focus on what gets us there.
Yeah, I mean, this goes all the way back to Sun Tzu. Know yourself, know the other, know the train. And in this world, the train is the market. And you're like,
Exactly.
yeah,
Ex
yeah,
e
we are this. Let's go win by doing this.
exactly. And,
All right.
and let's not focus on too many things. Let's narrow this down to what we are, what's available in the market, and where I think I can bring in good people to make that happen.
So, we'll talk more about the people transition because you've alluded to it twice. But before we do that, if you jump to forward today and go, well, here's what True Good looks like today versus what it was when I started, SunGrid, different name, all that. You're like, we'll talk about the business today and what you're most proud of.
I'm certainly proud of a couple of things. We did two um, we did 5 projects in 2025, and keep in mind that TruGrid spun up in Q4 of 2024. So to win and deliver 5 projects in a single year is something I'm very proud of. Those projects were on or ahead of schedule. For our purposes, we beat the margins that we bid it at, so we delivered them under budget or over margin, depending on how you want to look at it. We did that all with having a perfect safety record. In fact, we were just awarded the perfect safety record by the National Safety Council a couple of weeks ago. And we did that with high enough quality and high enough client satisfaction that both those 5 projects represented 2 portfolio companies. Both of those companies have awarded us work now in 2026. So to
Awesome.
me, that those things are a huge win. And with all of the turmoil in the industry, particularly in the renewable industry, as we've switched from, the previous administration to the current administration, and things like tax credits and tariffs and all of the headwinds that have been put in place to be able to, you know, be awarded and then successfully deliver 5 projects is something safely is something I'm extremely proud of.
Yeah, awesome. And from a how are you spending your time these days? What would you say? You.
It's really doing 2 things. It's doing step changes in the organization of how do we improve our tech stack. And so one of the things I'm extremely proud of and have spent years trying to do, and quite frankly, this is the first time in my career I've ever been successful doing it, is we have all of our tech stack with APIs talking to each other so
Mm,
that you can get information automatically as you go through. And it's not about the tech stack, and it's not about hey, this is really cool because we have NetSuite and Procore and Salesforce and blah blah blah. It's for me all of construction, project management, project execution, construction execution. Use whatever terminology you want. Is about really. I mean, PM 101 to me is number one, identify risk. Number two, mitigate risk. Number three, if you can't mitigate, you escalate. That is project management. And the sooner you know there's a problem, the sooner you can address it, and the more bandwidth and the more time you have to try to fix that problem and course correct. Too many times in my career, delivering projects around the world, you find out the information 6 or 8 weeks later in a monthly review meeting, I could have course corrected 4 weeks ago, but now it's too late. I can't do anything to change the outcome. And so having this auto magic integration with pieces where we're grabbing information real time with metadata and able to do things and look at it and do different stuff allows us to get the right information in the hands of the right people at the right time so they can course correct. And that to me is really that is an extremely powerful piece that the organization has done. So I spent a whole lot of time doing that, and making sure that that continually moves forward. And now, how does AI play into that? How can we do a better job of looking at that stuff? And to the point that I mentioned earlier, that kind of that second piece is what do I focus my time in. I want to understand how AI works before I roll it out to the rest of the organization, because we need to establish governance around it. What are we going to use? What platform or platforms are we going to use? How are we going to use it? Where are we going to use it? What's it good for? What's it not? I can't
Yeah.
really lead an organization without understanding that myself.
Yeah, when do we let it make decisions? When do we let it make recommendations? I mean,
Right.
there's a bunch in it, of course, and,
Correct.
there's plenty of people that go, "Yeah, jump at it," and you're like, "Well, cautious,
Yeah.
understand it first before you jump at it." It's a powerful tool, but it can also powerful tools can
Right.
hurt things, so
All of them have what's called hallucinations, where they make up information or make up what they think the
y
right information is, and being able to understand that and be able to challenge it,
yeah.
a lot of it. I think the one thing I didn't understand that I've really getting to understand is most of it operates on OpenAI or the same platforms. It's just different algorithms, and you have to know how to speak the algorithm. And Claude speaks differently than Grok, speaks differently than Gemini, and being able to understand that and what they're good at and how they interact with each other is the important piece.
So you talked about earlier in our conversation about having to change the team, make drastic change, big change. I can't remember how you talked about it. Um, but what drove that? What was behind it? What were you sensing
We
as
we
leader to drive that?
it, we had a lot of it was having the wrong people in the wrong positions. We had some good people, but they just weren't in the right position. The other was, you know, sometimes organizations just grow to grow, and so you bring in some bright people, but they have little to no experience and then no mentorship, and then they struggle. And so some of that was we've got to it costs money, but you've got to get some of the right people in the right places in order to lead the different divisions, departments, whatever you want to call it, of your organization. And how does that trickle down? And to that point, we had we were a very laddered organization. We had way too many ladders, and a lot of that was flattening the organization out so that we had managers with a single report with a single report, and that's not typically very effective. So being able to flatten that org chart out was part of that internal role that we did immediately.
So in your response, you said, "Hey, I had to spend money. I had to go spend more than I was for talent." Many leaders struggle with that. They try to do it on the cheap. And my last 5 years of looking at the difference between A players and C players is A players are free. They're, if you start to look at the data, they're two to four times more productive than the average. And I look at that and I go, so I can pay them almost double
Right.
what the average is, and I'm still going to make it's free that I'm getting this bandwidth. And you and I know, and almost every entrepreneur that's had an A player is the same, which is, and it's just a lot easier life. Like, I don't have to worry about them doing the work correctly. They're awesome. They are
Yeah,
pushing me. And as you
but
said before, I don't have to be the smartest guy in the room. They are.
yeah, absolutely. The
So
Now,
how do you think?
I'll say there's a downside to that, which is, it's one of the things I think I'm pretty good at and kind of pride myself on. But there are many times, you put five prima donnas in a room, and it's who are all A players who all think they're right, and they're not necessarily are they all right. And so, I do have to play a bit of referee. I do have to reset goals and reset ambitions and that kind of thing from time to time, because you do end up with a whole lot of A players and trying to make them play together in the same sandbox.
So two things. I'm going to jump back to that here in a minute. But when you had this leap of faith that I could go pay, many leader entrepreneurs never get there. They're like, I'm going to keep doing it on the cheap. When or how did you go? Yeah, I need to do that. What either gave you the confidence? You'd already seen it somewhere else.
Yeah, it's that probably happened maybe when I was at Jacobs or Deloitte. So that was probably 15 years ago, 10 to 15 years ago, that kind of transition in my brain, like, okay, I can give a whole bunch of B and C players at a reasonable cost, but if I don't have at least one strong A player to lead that team, it will I'll end up being the A player and leading that team. And
You,
that's not
you-
my
uh,
role.
yeah, Jody. I mean that's I work with CEOs, a couple hundred a year, and I go, you want to move toward lazy leadership. You want to wake up one day and go, well, I'm not sure what I'm doing. But like my role has changed so much in the last couple years that I don't feel like I'm doing anything. And what I say is, well, now you have a powerful team. Now you have a high performing herd. Now you have an awesome group of
Uh,
individuals around
I,
you.
yeah, I think one of the highest in my mind, one of the highest praises I ever got. And that, when you ask that question, I think about it. Probably the point in time when that shifted in my brain was, I'm going to say it was 2010-11 timeframe. I was at Jacobs. My boss, a guy named Steve Summers, um, had complaints about my team because we did a few things that were a little extra. We had, in the Jacobs world, we had a Beyond Zero room, which happened to have a foosball table and stuff for people could go play on, which I know in the tech world is very cool. In the engineering world, that's unheard of. And at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we would go downstairs for 15 minutes, and the team of 40 or 50 people, somebody would bring in treats, and we'd have just a little discussion and go back to work. And I got multiple complaints of, I don't think Jody's doing anything. His team takes too many breaks, and he Jody was gone for 2 weeks on vacation. His team worked fine without him. I don't even know what he does there. And Steve's answer to this gentleman, who then related to me, but that's really kind of the mind shift for me, was you need to figure out how to be more like Jody and less do like what you're doing right now. And
Um,
in my mind, that clicked of, wait, I guess I do have a functioning team here.
well, and Jody, I have a very similar story. I was running a sales organization of a couple hundred people, and we were going through reviews, and we were looking at like number two rep in the company. And his manager said, "Yeah, and if this guy wouldn't play golf 3 times a day, he'd probably be even more successful." And the rest of the managers in the room all piled on it and started talking about like, "Well, that's BS," and blah, 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 blah. And I said, "Well, my view is maybe all of your reps should start playing golf 3 times a day because this guy's crushing it doing that, and maybe that's the secret." I mean,
Clearly, it's working.
yeah, I mean, the results are the results, and I think as you get high performing teams, you go, "Yeah, we're not working as hard. We're working smarter. We're more effective." All of those things. And so you mentioned though that yeah, you got a room of what we'll call it prima donnas, and then our culture has to take over. Then we need to have healthy debate. Now we need to have, but clearly, this was my other recollection is that it's harder. I mean, it's a lot easier just to tell people what to do,
Yeah.
but it's harder to get amazing results. On the flip side, when you have a room full of awesome people, it's harder to channel, get consensus, live through healthy debate, make sure our culture is right. It's well described in a book, Travel Leadership, that we got to move from stage three, which is I'm great, you're not. That's where we have combative, like, the sales department's awesome, but ops isn't, to a no, we're collectively great. And the power of all of us is what makes us awesome. So clearly you've had to live through that dynamic, which is, well, how do I align people? How do we have healthy conflict? What's your sense of that and how you've done that at TruGrid or other places?
I would certainly say, we are approaching your step 4 there. We're kind of in between 3 and 4. So we had folks that I knew but didn't necessarily know each other, come in, and so, there's always that, confrontational piece of it, not to mention that, particularly with the shift in administration, things that happened through 2025, we had parts that downtime. We had parts that were lull because we hadn't won enough work yet, and those kinds of things. And what I have found throughout my career, and no different at TruGrid, is when that happens, people start to leave their lanes and look at other people's lanes and say, "Hey, you're not doing that right," or "You're not doing this right," and it's like, well, we hired this person because they're really, really good at what they do. Stay in your lane. And sometimes that's easier said than done. And so it is, but we had 5 great projects last year, some great
Yeah.
successes. We've won more work and getting ready to deliver on those. And so people are starting to see, hey, you might not do it exactly the same way I would, but you're getting the results. And so maybe I should leave you alone.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I always start to talk about that as we start stacking wins. And when we start stacking wins, people start to believe we can win.
Yeah.
How do we then operate as a team? Is that described in our core values? Do you guys have core values that are like robust, alive,
We
or
do.
is it?
We do.
And
I'm a firm believer. We have core values, number one. Number two, I'm a firm believer in OKRs, objectives and key results, which then roll into KPIs and metrics, which then roll into SMART goals. And and you do it in that order so that you're even the most junior person in the organization, their SMART goals are aligned to their supervisor's SMART goals, who are aligned to the next, to the
yeah,
next, to the next, which support those OKRs.
yeah, I mean, long have used either traction, scaling up, or a system like that, which is
Yep.
described in all very similar. Which is, we have a 2-page strategic plan. We know what our 10-year goals
Yep.
are. We know what our annual goals are. We know what our quarterly rocks are. We have a
Yep.
win the week scoreboard. Are you doing that with outside help, or is that just something you've gleaned and done yourself?
No, we're doing that all internally right now. So,
All right.
yeah.
Um, as you look at that process, clearly it drives alignment. How would you talk about it for your team? What has it meant for your team?
So it's been really nice. I'm also because it does align the organization, right? And then you start to see, the problem. One of the problems with the construction industry is it's you know the stuff I'm working on today trying to sell, I'll close in a year and deliver a year after that, right? It takes a long time for the sales cycle, and it takes a long time to then build it, and then a long time to see, hey, something I did 2 years ago actually paid off now. So it is a much longer cycle. So sometimes it's more difficult to see than other organizations where, manufacturing, where you can make something in a widget in a few minutes and have it sold the next day. It is a longer piece of that. That being said, I am a huge fan, and this is something we've done since I started, in the 90-day quick win program. And so where you set, basically every department comes up every 90 days and says, tell me 2 things that you can do in the next 90 days that will make a positive, significant change that other people will notice within the organization, and then deliver on those. And they can be very simple, or difficult, or whatever else, or you can break it down into multiple chunks if that makes more sense. And then we meet every 2 weeks to talk about where are we on that, how are we delivering it, and what's going to happen. And
Yeah, well,
last year in 2025, we had we delivered on 93% of our quick wins, which happened to be 87 things. So it was, I was, I, and again, that gives that feedback loop of, I did something. I made a change in the organization. Other people noticed it. It made their lives easier, and we keep going.
So, this all an attempt to align. I'm sure there are periods where leaders aren't aligned, as you alluded to. When we get A players strong, I call it strong autonomy. They're willing to push, which we love until we feel like they're pushing on each other or us. And that we get this, I call it momentary. Hey, we're kind of pulling in different directions. We're not aligned. We're where you think this is the right result. Many of us don't. When those things have occurred recently, how do you get the team back on kind of common ground?
It it's all about communication. It's solely about communication, and sometimes that's communication as a group. Sometimes that communication is a one-on-one, and I think I have certainly had um, feedback from my reports in the past of, well, why didn't you say anything to XYZ? And I'm like, I did, 2 hours after the meeting we had, you just didn't see it. And because I am also right, wrong, or indifferent, I'm a huge fan of you praise to the group and you criticize individually. And so I do get pushback of people like, well, you didn't say anything and you didn't talk to them. Well, I did. I just didn't do it in front of you. And so but to answer your question, it's all about communication.
So Jody, I'm curious in that because I fundamentally believe the same, but I've also noticed in my 5 years working with companies, or at least the last 5 years in this same vein that we're talking about, that yet it requires often, I'll call it the self confidence, the willingness to confront when it's wrong in front of the group without making the person feeling belittled. So it can be a pause momentarily, like, well, are we all living our core values right now? It doesn't have to be John. What you just said there was horseshit. Um,
It,
there's a
it's so funny.
way to get the group back without belittling. Because I'm with you. Like we
Right.
want to praise everyone in front of everyone, and we don't want to move. But there's a role I think of leadership to go. But are we living to our expectation? And
So
part of that is our vision and core values. Part of that is the way we just treat each other as human. And, in my teams, I'm like, we can vehemently disagree. What we can't do is belittle, demean, scream. And I go, that doesn't mean you can't be passionate. That doesn't mean you can't raise your voice. It just means you're not going to scream at someone in disagreement. And
the
so,
I would definitely say the way I interacted with people at Jacobs um, 12, 15 years ago was yell and scream and throw your toys around the room. And
yeah,
that's what was um, almost applauded at that organization. I then went to Deloitte, which I will call my finishing school, which is how to not say purple words. I had a classes on how to not say purple words, how to speak to C-suite folks versus project managers and construction managers and other things out in the field, and it is different. And in my mind, I didn't know it was different until I then knew it was different. And so some of that is how to ultimately um we have we've played it off and on, and it's coming back on again, but there was a book written by a famous Olympian from the UK called Does It Make the Boat Go Faster?
yeah,
and
love it. Love it. Yeah.
and so something that really I probably heard him speak 10, 12 years ago, and it was one of those things that really stuck with me because it made so much more sense, which is, you know, let's stop for a second. Does this make the boat go faster? Because if it doesn't, let's set it to the side and figure out how to make the boat go faster. And
Yeah, I mean,
um,
he has a short video clip, Jody, that I love where they talk about it, and he's like, "So we'd be done with practice." You're like, "You wanna go to the pub?" And we go, "Well, does it make the boat go faster?" And he goes, "Unfortunately, no, so we didn't go to the pub."
yeah, that's exactly
If we run 5 extra miles, will it make the boat go faster? Unfortunately, yes, so we ran 5 more miles. And
right.
again, I think it's awesome for organizations.
Yeah, I do too. It's one I really, really prescribe to, and in saying that, part of those conversations are either okay, we're going to take this offline, or it's going to be a subset of this group because maybe not all 10 people on the phone have an interest or need to hear, this conversation. And some of it is, hey, does this make the boat go faster? Well, then let's focus on something else if it doesn't.
Awesome. As you think about the next stage of growth for TruGrid, what will need to change? What will need to be different?
Um, we have a very good foundation of being able to scale. The whole point of this organization was was to be able to be scalable and repeatable. Let's do the same thing. Let's do it well. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. Let's do it again. Let's reincorporate our lessons learned from the last project. How do we get better at what we do and do that? So that's number one. And number two is we have to be able to do that. It's a step change of how do we move from here, which is, we're doing, however many tens of millions, 100 million worth of work a year, to that next stage of, okay, I'm not running 5 projects, I'm running 25 projects. And that piece is your upper middle management, which in this organization today doesn't exist. And so
Yeah.
it's how do I bring that on to be able to be repeatable and scalable? So you have to be able to bring people on and have enough foundation, enough workflow processes, enough of fundamentals in order to be scalable and repeatable and do it again, no matter who's sitting in that role. And that's we think we're close, maybe already there, but very close in, okay, the foundation's good. We've delivered 5 projects. We've won some more with the same clients. They're happy. We have, high scores on our client satisfaction surveys. How do we now go from 5 projects to 25 projects and add that layer in so that we can still deliver the same things over and over again?
And it's an awesome scaling challenge. It becomes hire, train, make sure they understand our systems, hold people accountable. Um, have you lived through that? I'm sure because you talked about the growth other places. And as you think about that for your organization, what will be required?
Hiring the right people. It's bringing in the right people and being able to wait. Oh, this is a B player or a B minus player, and then having the fortitude to say either, okay, is that good enough? Or do we need to wait another 90 days until we get an A player? Because there are sometimes the B player is fine. You need B players, but sometimes it's not. And being able to wait because you're going to be scaling, and it's like I got to fill that position. I got to get people in there. We got to deliver this. We got to hire people, and you end up with even sub B players.
Yeah, and
Ended up
then
methodology.
that hurts you, right? And
Right.
this becomes the am I paying, finding
And,
the right people goes back
and
to
then
our
and then for me, the difficult part will be okay. We're scaling is to say no. Okay, no, we're going to go another 3 months or 6 months before we win another project because we have to be able to deliver this because I'm not sure we can scale at this point.
well, and Jody, I talk about this in the organizations that there has to be healthy tension between momentum and quality. That our organization has to wrestle with that all the time. Like we want to grow, we want momentum, we want the new thing, but we also can't do that entirely at the expense of quality. And
Correct.
there's places where we want to do that. Like if we've never done it before, we go, well, we're gonna fail, we're gonna make mistakes, we're gonna do it wrong, but we know that. In the stuff that we're not supposed to, however, let's not do that. Let's do it correctly. Let's make sure that we are growing with quality. And there's a there in the best organizations that I work with, that's what you see. That is in healthy tension all the time.
Yeah.
So,
No, agreed.
um, if you look at your senior leadership team today and go, here's the one thing I need to fix. Here's what I need to change. Here's the thing that I wish was slightly different. What is that?
Um, it's for me, it's embracing people's differences and those and as a subset of that, then how do I deliver work within the workflow processes? Because you have all these departments. How do I make sure that I include people when I need to, and I don't include them when I don't need to? Um, People have FOMO, so one of the very first things I did, I think the first or second meeting I had when I was at SunGrid, and it wasn't like a town hall or a company meeting or anything. This was just a project meeting. There were 27 people on our side on the call, and I'm like, no, we don't need 27 people, of which four people talked. Like the other people just sat on and like this is, so that was just is just a waste. And so it's being able to discern what's important and what's not. Does it make the boat go faster? And what can I live, you know, without, or live with just getting the three bullet points on at the end of the meeting, versus I have to sit in it and be a part of it and insert myself. And being able to trust that, again, the other individuals or group or team might not do it the same way I do it, but they're still successful. And being
Yeah.
able to accept that and not try to insert myself. I think that is probably going to be the next evolution of this organization, is because we are growing, we are scaling, like and it's going to be this, you know I don't know exactly what they're doing over there, but I'm getting the product I need and I can work with it and I can move on.
Yeah, right results, I trust. We have a system of accountability. We're seeing the key metrics, as you already alluded to, doing the right things. I don't have to know everything and and that's much for leaders. Like I won't know everything. And if I have to know everything, then the organization can't be
Right.
what it could be. So if you jump ahead, we'll call it 3 years from today, and you had to define success, what is it?
um so there's two pieces to that. So organizationally, success of TruGrid is that we have a highly competent company that can deliver, in our niche, this 10 to 250 megawatt solar and battery, effectively, um, on budget and on schedule, and but most importantly is do it safely. Like I am extremely proud of the fact, I have 19 years between Jacobs, through Deloitte and Covanta and Avangrid and IEA and now at TruGrid, where I've overseen almost 16 million labor hours of work with four recordables. And that is the most important thing to me, is that folks go home, you know, people I hear all the time, "Oh, we want you to go home the same way you came in." I actually go one step further. I want you to go home safer than what you came in. And by saying that, that means you learned something at work today that, hey, I should do this or I should not do this, that you actually incorporate into the way you think, that you take home with me. And one of the most powerful things, I had a complete reset when I was at Jacobs, so this maybe 12, 13 years ago. We had had a whole week of safety contacts and meetings, and every meeting opened with a safety contact, and it was about ladder safety, working at heights, doing all these things. And my lead construction manager and I, we were both expats living in Calgary. We lived 10 blocks from each other. I had left an hour after from work after he had, and I'm driving home, and I drove by his yard, and he's in on a ladder cleaning leaves out of the gutters, hanging on one arm, one leg, reaching as far as he possibly can. And I'm like, all of the things we talked about this week clearly did not have an impact on you, and because you're not acting in a safe manner of everything you just learned and actually taught and espoused to your teams, and this isn't working. And had a complete reset of how do we approach that safety culture, and how do we work so that you go home safer than you came in. And that is something I'm very proud of, and it's something, so to me, number one, 3 years, we have a perfect safety record. That to me, that's non-negotiable. The rest of it
And
falls into place.
and Jody, I work with a lot of organizations that wrestle with this. It sounds like you've found something to make that happen more effectively than most. What's the something?
Um, I call it it's the courage to intervene.
Okay.
And so in a lot of organizations, safety cultures and everything else, you'll have the 19-year-old come onto the site who's an apprentice, whatever, electrician, and there's the 35-year-old tenured, or 55-year-old, but he's been in the business for 35 years, master electrician, and the apprentice has to have we have to create a culture where that apprentice can say, you know what, I just went through safety classes last week, and what they told me was different than what you're doing right now. Are you sure you're doing this right? And creating a culture where people are emboldened to be able to say something in that this doesn't look quite right. And that's more often than not, that's number one. And number two, in creating that safety culture, if you look, again, I'm a data guy, so I look at lots of data and everything else, but normally the number one, when you do a root cause and your five whys and all that, go back and look at why you had an incident and those kinds of things, it's almost always that the conditions changed. You laid out at 6 o'clock in the morning, this is what we're doing today, this is what's going to happen, this is the weather conditions, blah blah blah, here's all my risks and my mitigations, I've laid it out, and we've done da da da. At noon, a pop-up thunderstorm happens, or oh, this happened over here, we have to shift and do something else today. And everybody, rightfully so, on sites are so driven of, I got five things I got to get done today, it's got to get done by 3 o'clock, or we're going to be behind schedule, and that doesn't work. We create a culture. It's okay to take the 10 minutes, step back and say, you know what? Conditions have changed here. The work has changed. Let's reevaluate the risks and come up with a new mitigation strategy to take care of those.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Clearly, there's going to be listeners who will go, "Yeah, hey, Jody's done some really good things here." If you were going to give them advice, like how have I built these teams? What's the one thing I would want entrepreneurs to know about doing that? What would you share with them?
Um, Listen to the smart people in the room. Don't try to be the smartest person in the room. Don't. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're a leader, that is not your role. And that's very difficult because a lot of entrepreneurs start because they had a great idea, because and so then that rolls into, well, if I had this great idea, then I'm always going to have great ideas, and therefore I'm always going to be the smartest person in the room and lead that. And in my experience, that normally doesn't work.
So, Jody, I want to go all the way back to the beginning because you said something right there that triggered a thought for me and all your early roller coaster. And I've had some of the same in my career where you think after you do this, like, oh, this is easy and the magic sauce is there and I can do this anywhere. And then you realize that no, there's setback and there's
Right.
change and there's like what was awesome is no longer awesome. Is that part of it?
Yeah. You have to recognize that. I don't care what industry you're in. To me, it really doesn't matter. You will not be delivering the same product, the same team, the same project, the same whatever a year from now that you're doing today. You won't be, because the market conditions will change, your clients will change, everything will change, and you have to be able to adapt and change with it. And the good leaders, in my opinion, can foresee that. They see 6 months out, they see 9 months out, 12 months out, and say, we have to change today in order to be able to deliver this a year from now.
Jody, if people want to follow you or TruGrid, where should they go?
Um, TruGridPower.com is certainly our home website, and you can see all those activities. But really, our marketing team does an amazing job on LinkedIn, and there's almost, I would say, there's an update every single day where we highlight individuals in the organization, projects they've won, published white papers, conferences we've spoken at, and those types of things. And it's highly interactive. We have thousands of followers on TrueGrid, and you'll see that on really the highest amount of information on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Jody, really appreciate you being on the episode today. There was so much that I would call real candid. Here's the ups and downs. Here's how I found success, and greatly appreciate that and your time today.
David, I appreciate you, and I appreciate the time that you've given me. This has been a great experience, and love doing it. Thank you.
Thanks, Jody.